Joining me now to discuss all of this, Quill Robinson of the American Conservative Coalition. Quill, good evening to you, and always good to see you. Let's start with day one of the Biden administration. What does he come in and do? He shuts down the Keystone pipeline, he bans drilling on federal land, and essentially says, my biggest agenda item, for my presidency is alternative energy and climate change. And there were the dynamics that set us up for the current moment that we're in.
Sure. Well, Jackie, President Biden started off his administration by kneecapping America's ability to produce energy. And I think that that's a huge problem, and we're seeing the consequences of that now. I hope that this is an opportunity for him to hit reset on his strategy. And I think right now is the time to go all in on maximizing American energy production. And that's an all of the above approach, not just oil and gas, not just wind and solar. There are a lot of things that he can be doing right now, including increasing exports of American LNG, opening up the production of critical minerals in the United States, doing more renewable energy. Sure, but we need to maximize our energy production right now, not limit it.
We absolutely do. And we have the LNG. We could export it to Europe. You don't really need the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, especially in this emergency situation. But we haven't built out our infrastructure to fully be able to do that while, we signed a $1.9 trillion bill, looking at other types of infrastructure, but not this type of infrastructure. And so there's that issue. When you look at the Nord Stream 2, some people are saying that essentially Biden administration greenlighting this gave Vladimir Putin even more strength, more ability to say, that he was the he was the stronger leader among this dynamic between him and President Biden. Some say that President Biden was trying to appease him in some ways, giving him that pipeline and hoping that he would back off. Obviously, that didn't work.
Sure. Well, we always knew that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline would send German cash into Russian oligarchs' pockets and send fossil fuels right into Germany. And I think we really do need to pay attention to Germany in this situation because the policies that they have pursued in that country are not only bad for national security, they're also bad for the climate. Germany is canceling all of their nuclear power plants and spent a lot of money on renewable energy, and they're not actually hitting their climate goals. So even through that lens, I don't think we can look at that as a success. And we need to understand that what they implemented was Green New Deal light, and we should not do that here in the United States.
And that's really interesting to me because when it comes to our NATO partners, we've been talking so much about, standing up with them and being properly aligned with them. That was essentially one of the issues that President Trump had with NATO. It was that all the countries, we weren't on the same page, right? And so we needed to be, if we were going to be able to align and work together to solve problems and to solve crises. And he also wanted every country to pull its weight and not just have the United States bear the brunt of everything. So when you look at what you're describing with respect to Germany, how Germany has handled this situation with respect to Russia, not necessarily standing up in the way that you would want it to, and you kind of say to yourself, we need to sort of come together with respect to taking on our enemies and do this in a real way.
I think that that's exactly right, and I think that this really places a sharp focus on how important energy is when it comes to security. I think it's high time to recognize that energy security is national security, and that we need to be exporting as much energy as possible because what's going on in Russia right now is really going to put the pinch on our allies, and we need to make sure that they are not reliant on strategic adversaries. And I think that we can do that, but it's going to take a much smarter approach than what the Biden administration has been doing for the last year.
So there's a couple of things that he could do here immediately. I'm going to write his playbook for him, essentially. He could say, we're going to drill on federal lands. He could say, we're going to restart the Keystone pipeline, and that's going to start bringing some oil down from Canada and help us out here at home. He could say, we're going to take some of that infrastructure money and invest it in our terminals so that we can do more exporting. One thing that he cannot say, and I don't want people to be confused about this, is that the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, tapping that is going to fix this. When he tapped it last time, I think it was 50 million barrels. That's roughly 3 days of consumption here in the United States. The whole SPR would only keep us going for roughly a month with the amount of oil that we consume. So people keep saying he should do that. I don't think that's one of the playbook items, but I don't think, Quill, that he's going to do the other things that I suggested either.
Again, Jackie, it really needs to be an all-of-the-above approach, and I completely agree with what you just were pointing to right there. But again, I mean, I think it's thinking long-term here. It's thinking about nuclear in the United States, and we've been going the wrong direction when it comes to nuclear. Nuclear plants are shutting down. It's expanding renewable energy. It's all of the above that we need right now. And just one final thing I want to point out.
Yeah.
He's placed such a big priority on climate change. The reality is that Russian natural gas, when it's imported into Europe, actually produces 40% more emissions than American gas in Europe. So even those policies that he's pursued here have been counterproductive in regards to climate change.
Yeah, no, that's very ironic. Let's just say that. Quill Robinson, good to see you. Thank you so much.